Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
It's really nice to have visitors. Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Meyer Davis, and I lived here in Mount Clemens. But actually, I was born in a little town in Lithuania. I'm what they call a Litva. My parents had 13 children. 12 of us all came to the United States. Many of us came to the Detroit area and some came to other places, as far as Florida and California, New York. One sister would not come. She wanted to stay in Lithuania. She came one time for a visit, but we couldn't convince her to come. We lost her in the Holocaust. Well, we came in 1905. And I worked in Detroit. I'm a rabbi. I'm also a shochet. If you don't know what a shochet is, that's a ritual slaughterer. The one that kills the meat in the the humane way well, that's a long story. But when we found out that business was really, really booming in Mount Clemens with the mineral baths and a lot of people coming and tourists and the population growing, we moved back to Mount Clemens, where I opened up with a partner a butcher shop. But we needed a synagogue. We didn't have a synagogue. So one of the hotel owners, Moses Ray, let us use one of his rooms to have our services. And I conducted services, and I taught Hebrew school. And Moses and I and some others started a building fund so we could build a synagogue. We started first in a home in South Walnut. We called it Beis Yisrael, House of Israel. But in the meantime, in 1912, Sam Elkin and Max Schneider, I think his last name was, started to charter a new congregation called Beth Tefillah Moses. If you don't know what that means in English, that's a house of prayer of Moses. Tefillah actually means benediction, but we could use it as a prayer. In 1912, the Hebrew Association started this cemetery, and a little bit later, it was taken over by the Beth Tefillah Moses Synagogue. That's why you see that name on the door. In 1920, they finally started construction on our brand new synagogue, Beth Tefillah Moses. A beautiful building. It started with beautiful stairs leading up to the doorways. The building was 3 stories high. The sanctuary had ancient seats that were very, very comfortable, and an Oren Kodesh. An Oren Kodesh is the cabinet where you keep the Torah. The Torah, if you don't know what it is the Pentateuch in scroll form, the original way the Torah was written. It was 3 stories high. It was built of beautiful Italian wood with carvings on each side. We had a balcony for women and children, and a screen to separate the men from the women. Women were not allowed to sit with the men, or men were not allowed to sit with the women, because there has to be no distractions when you pray. We had 50 beautiful windows, stained glass windows. I understand that 12 of them are in the new synagogue. We had a study for the rabbi. We had Hebrew school 3 nights a week. The synagogue was packed with children, and I was one of the teachers. Well, let me tell you something. This reminds me. As I told you, that women do not sit with men in shul. And I called an injunction against those who wanted to do that. We had like a civil war in Mount Clemens. We had fathers against sons, brothers against sisters. It was a terrible thing. But in the injunction, the trial court said they can't rule on a religious subject. So they let it go, but I understand later it did become what they call a conservative synagogue where men sit with women. But they're happy with that, then may the Lord bless them. But let me tell you something what I'm really, really, really proud of. Sarah, whose maiden name was Shapiro, and I had 7 children in Mount Clemens. 7 children. William, Harry, and Ada went to the University of Michigan. William was an administrator in Detroit. He had 2 children. Harry was a chemical engineer. He had children, 2 children. And Ada was an economist who did some statistical work where she met her husband, who was in the Air Force, the Selfridge Air Force Base. She became a mayor of Mount Clemens. And she and her husband, they met in New York, but it was funny because he originally was from Selfridge Air Force Base, and he moved back to Selfridge Air Force Base, and she came back to Mount Clemens. Louis went to Wayne State University. I think at that time it was called Wayne State College. Became an attorney. Was also city attorney for Mount Clemens for a while. Florence was she had 4 children. Florence was a social worker. She had 2 children. Betty became a teacher. She had 2 children. And Arya Elaine was a printer, and she had 4 children and moved to Florida. She didn't get old enough to move to Florida. I thought you had to be an old person to move to Florida. Anyway, that is really the problem. All of this happened in this great city of Mount Clemens. Imagine that. I have 20 grandchildren, and some of them are still around here in Detroit, in New York, other places like that. But let me tell you something else. If you really want to hear a real fascinating story, go see Dr. Wolf over there. He has an amazing story to tell you. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.